In the following winter, I was standing at the window one night and looked north. I saw a blood-red glow, like the flicker of the sea from afar, stretched from east to west across the northern horizon. And at that time, someone asked me what I thought about world events in the near future. I said I had no thoughts, but saw blood, rivers of blood. When Carl Jung had the vision of the flood in October of the year 1913, it happened at a time that was significant for him as a man. He says, "In the 40th year of my life, I had achieved everything I had wished for myself. I had achieved honor, power, wealth, knowledge, and every human happiness. Then my desire for the increase of these trappings ceased. The desire ebbed from me, and horror came over me. The vision of the flood seized me, and I felt the spirit of the depths, but I did not understand him." In the same way, you cannot explain BTS's newest music video without the context of the times, you can't explain Jungian theory without the context of the times. In 1913, Jung was not alone in his vivid prophetic visions. Other artists and philosophers wrote about an impending event that would change the world forever, but none of them knew for sure what this event was until the outbreak of World War I, an event that would result in approximately 20 million deaths worldwide. When Jung looked back on his visions, he began to see the power of the human psyche and what we eventually refer to as the collective unconscious. Many are familiar with BTS's use of Jungian themes and vocabulary. Since Map of the Soul Persona was released, this has become much more explicit. Persona, shadow, and ego as the beginning, middle, and end of their album series titled Map of the Soul. I'm not going to go into the basics of Jungian thought and how BTS uses these concepts, as this has been covered many times in other videos, Twitter threads, and even podcasts. Rather, I'm going to explore one concept in particular, and that is the collective unconscious. I feel like many people don't want to explore this in the BTS fandom because, one, it can be very reductionist to say that we're all connected and affected by that connection, and that's why we do certain things or create certain things. And two, it's weird. It's more mystical than psychological, and it's been heavily criticized for being unprovable. It's felt and it's experienced. It's not a belief, but it is a practice. And there's nothing in Jung's theories that is absolute. This mostly goes for the other stuff too. The terms persona, shadow, and ego are all great tools. You can give these tools to people so that they can give a name to something that they know, but don't quite yet understand. But the collective unconscious is really not that. It's not a tool. It's more than that because it can provide explanation for why people do things on a greater scale. And the reason I want to explore it is because something really odd happened after On was released. Something that either no one noticed or everyone noticed and simply doesn't know how to talk about it. So I'm going to take you on a little prophetic journey down the rabbit hole of Jungian visioning and the BTS content that has been dropped since the Map of the Soul era began in 2019. I warn that this is not a video I made lightly, and I will be dropping another warning at the end to fully explain what I mean by that. Side note, I actually made a video about the mythology of BTS that covers their early work, so if you want to get a short intro to BTS and why I think the Jungian influences are an interesting point in their journey to success, I suggest you watch that first. What is the collective unconscious? Going back to the really important context regarding Jung and his ideas, Carl Jung was once a reluctant student of Freud, the so-called founder of psychoanalysis. Freud believed Carl was going to be his apprentice of sorts, until one day Carl said, "I'm having these odd dreams about two skulls in my basement." Deciphering dreams is like Freud's bread and butter, so Freud responded, "Oh, those must be people you're harboring a death wish against." And he insisted that Carl's subconscious was wanting these people dead, and it was important that Carl identify the skulls so he could deal with those thoughts about them. And Carl was like, "No, I don't recognize them. I feel like they were in a part of my psyche that was much deeper than my personal unconscious." And this is where Jung splits off from Freud. Jung says the skulls belonged to his primitive ancestors, and his dream was showing him the existence of the collective unconscious, which connects us to them. And this idea is revolutionary because it suggests that we are not simply products of our own experiences, but products of all human experience. So the map of the soul exists already because it's handed down to you in a way. The experience of living is within you, and you have the ability to really dive in and do some intense exploration of it. This is where archetypes and the ideas of the levels of the human psyche come into play. It all goes back to this idea that every human being contains these variations of the self. The human fingerprint, for example, is instantly recognizable, yet every fingerprint has a configuration unique to its owner. Archetypes similarly combine the universal with the individual, the general with the unique, and that they are common to all humanity, yet nevertheless manifest themselves in every human being in a way peculiar to him or to her. Part 2. Dreams. In 1913, Jung began a self-experiment known as his confrontation with the unconscious. He sought to translate his emotions into images and to record his dreams, and he would enter these states of imaginative or visionary consciousness, actively exploring his own psyche. All of his notes and illustrations eventually became what is now known as the Red Book. The Red Book is a record of a grand visionary journey consisting of very important symbols and characters that came from history and religion. Jung had two spirit guides in the form of the prophet Elijah and Salome, the girl in the Bible who demanded the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Elijah represented the part of Jung that he was most comfortable with, intellectual, masculine, and logical, whereas Salome represented the dark feminine side, the part that wanted to lash out, cutting off the head of the masculine side. This terrified Jung, and throughout his visionary journey, Elijah eventually forced Jung to see Salome as a part of himself, beginning his descent into his lost feminine. I encourage anyone that is super interested in this stuff to go check out the Salome Institute and subsequent podcast analyzing the Red Book. I would not have been able to do this analysis without them. So back to Jung's visions. There are two other important parts of the Red Book, and that's the spirit of the times and the spirit of the depths. These are not mutually exclusive, but generally the spirit of the times is like the zeitgeist, or what people are feeling now in this time. The spirit of the depths lies beyond the now, in the past and in the future. It's where he found those skulls. Jung's visionary journey was about him retrieving his lost feminine to be able to transcend the binary of his masculine and feminine sides, and it was brought on by these visions that he had of a really horrible event. These visions also sparked his ideas of the collective unconscious, and his delving into his unconscious dug up imagery that was already baked into Jung's psyche. The religious symbols, the historical symbols that Jung had seen but not yet experienced. He now got to know them on a deeper level. He discovered the meaning behind these things that were already within him. All right, let's talk about BTS. Part 3, Bangtan Symbology. All art uses symbols, and specifically music videos use a lot of symbols to provide meaning, context, and metaphorical stuff that all add to the listener experience of the music. BTS fans, the ARMY, are very attuned to certain symbols. They know that the desert always transforms into a sea. They know that mirrors breaking mean that Jin didn't fix everything and has to go back in time again. They know that masks mean that someone is not being true to themselves and that it causes pain. They know that each member has their own symbology, and those symbols intermingle with one another, indicating those members are connected in some way. They know who Abraxas is, which is something I should make an entire video for because it is absolutely bizarre how important this Gnostic symbol is to BTS mythology. Anyway, the symbology of BTS is really important, and fans look to it to provide more hints and meaning to the ongoing storyline that's woven into so much of BTS's content. Map of the Soul Persona was released in April of 2019 and features songs like Persona, one of my favorite music videos ever. One of the things I don't see pointed out in other breakdowns of this MV is that the room is actually filmed with a fish lens, making it look like the exposed brain organ. I think that's kind of awesome. Anyway, Persona is basically where my last video left off. The album was introducing the explicitly Jungian era of BTS, the Map of the Soul era. BTS went on tour for a large part of 2019, coming back to Seoul at the end of July, going on a rare vacation for a month in August. They wrapped up the Love Yourself, Speak Yourself tour in October and went into award season. They attended all of the major shows and had fan meetings in Japan. Then, on January 10th, the comeback trailer was released for Shadow, introducing us to the final iteration of the Map of the Soul series, Map of the Soul 7. It was speculated and then later confirmed that this album was supposed to be 2 albums, Map of the Soul Shadow and Map of the Soul Ego, but it was combined into Map of the Soul 7. At the press conference for the album, RM said, "Last year we went on our extended vacation after discussions with the company. The comeback was pushed back slightly. Having come back in 10 months, we wanted to tell more and better stories, so we discussed putting together the ideas of Shadow and Ego. That's why the album contains both our shadows, the difficulties we faced, and ego, our acceptance of them as part of us." Before this album was released, the overwhelming chatter in the fandom was that the next album would be delving into some darker concepts, especially with the exploration of the shadow. It was already theorized that the second album in the series would be called Shadow, and then the third Ego, based off of all of the hints they were dropping at award shows. So it was kind of a surprise when Map of the Soul 7 was introduced and the concepts sort of thrown together into accepting the darkness. It felt very incomplete. And I don't think I'm alone in this. I don't think it's bad, just stick with me on this. It felt like the shadow required more teasing out. The ideas proposed in the intro alone felt like they needed more exploration. Black Swan went along with these ideas. At the same time, BTS was promoting a project that showcased interactive contemporary art pieces all over the world. This project was named Connect BTS. The curator of the project was quoted as saying, "The ultimate goal of the project is to connect individuals all across the world as they re-evaluate their present circumstances, attitudes, and potentialities." The date is January 14th, 2020. The Connect project wraps, and on February 21st, 2020, the music video for On drops. The Kinetic Manifesto, a continuation of the celebration of art and movement that connects people of all walks of life all around the world. It's incredible. It's got ARMY freaking out. It's largely ignored by the Western mainstream audiences. And then the actual music video drops. This video was highly anticipated, and a lot of people, myself included, were wondering what it would mean, not only for the storyline, but for BTS mythology and symbology as a whole. What was it going to say to us in a deeper way? What was going to be in it for the ARMY that had been so invested in their storytelling and artistry? And then it dropped, and it was absolutely bonkers. Part 4. What does it mean? Now, I don't want to say everyone was confused. There are a lot of really excellent theories and analyses out there, and all of them are legitimate. Hell, even some of the boys don't know what's going on in this video.
이번 뮤비는 저도 잘 모르겠어요. 물론 콘티와 이런 모든 것들 다 봤지만 저도 여러분들과 비슷하게 기대가 많이 되는 부분이 있는 것 같아요.
But what if I told you that that's kind of the point? The video uses imagery that most people are familiar with. Doves, drums, war, cages, dead trees, walls, blindfolds, fire, water, regrowth, mountains, calls to action, and calls to unity. And this is where things start to get weird. For a long time, ARMY, who enjoyed the Jungian theories, postulated that the Red Book was really important. And now, no one really knows what to do with this. Plenty of theorists said what we already sort of expected, which was that this was basically the process of individuation.
They've succeeded by finding themselves, and they've also helped us by leading us on the same path.
I love her, by the way, and she does a wonderful job in summarizing and providing context and meaning to the Jungian metaphors. But as I said earlier, I think that there's something else that's going on here. A lot of ARMY pointed out that the symbols were indicating some sort of call. The drums traditionally signal troops to gather. The conch shell calls for people to unite. Jungkook is a Christ-like figure who would be a leader of the people to unite against a threat. People also theorize that there was some sort of impending threat on the horizon, but it's never explicit what that is. The death and rebirth imagery is vivid, but ultimately without explanation. The dove lives, the trees grow again, the people are let out of their prison. And all of these symbols not only recall past BTS music videos, they also remind us of other forms of media: Maze Runner, The Lion King, Game of Thrones, Attack on Titan, images from Bible stories like Jericho and the Passion. I think this was all very intentional in order to speak to the audience's subconscious. While Jung's symbols were from the Bible and from the histories that he studied as a white man in the West at the brink of the 20th century, our symbols as BTS ARMY are those from popular, exciting media that we grew up with at the brink of the 21st century. We idolize these characters in our media, and we connect with the symbols that we are familiar with from that media, in the same way Jung connected with the figures of Salome and Elijah. But wait, because it gets weirder. What happened after that?
There are now more than 118,000 cases in 114 countries. We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
At this point, everyone in the world is experiencing the same disaster. All of a sudden, the on video that had called for unity is one that sends a warning, telling us that if we do not work together, something bad will happen. The video is a dream of what's to come, and the final shot of the video proposes this. No More Dream was the title track of BTS's first single. Now, after exploring all of the persona, shadow, and ego stuff, BTS is saying dream. It's okay to dream. But what does that actually mean? In the most Jungian of ways, it means that the whole of the video is a dream. It's a visionary journey. Jung's greatest epiphany was that people all over the world were experiencing a need to connect with one another because they were worried about a major catastrophic event on the horizon. You might have experienced this too, but before the pandemic, I had an intense need to connect with people. I was worried about the environment. I was worried about not being able to have kids. I was worried about my relationship with my closest relatives. And the pandemic happened, and it's magnified what was at the core of those fears. So in this bizarre thought experiment and going down the Jungian rabbit hole, I found something that is bittersweet. We might actually have the ability to foresee these events by connecting through art. Now, I don't think this is prophetic, at least not in the more common definitions of the term, but I do think that the collective unconscious is real in retrospect. I don't know what BTS's creative team intended when making this video. I don't know how much of a hand each member had in adding to it. I just know that meaning changes over time, and within 1 month, On went from being a call to speaking yourself to being a call to persist through the pain, because that's what we needed at that time. And even since then, the meaning has sort of changed. After the reality of the pandemic hit their team, BTS turned to creating works from afar, coincidentally projecting the ideas of the Connect BTS art series. They were utilizing technology to connect with and communicate with people all over the world in ways they had never tried before. Their messages adapted alongside the spirit of the times. Stay Gold, Dynamite, and the album B were released during this time. B not only fit into the individuation process, it also is essentially a pandemic-era album. The album reflects all of the members' experiences and being under quarantine, unable to do what they do best. There is no symbology present that we are familiar with. It is BTS as themselves. Namjoon, Seokjin, Yoongi, Hoseok, Jimin, Taeyang, and Jungkook just vibing, just being. It's not lost on me that their most ambitiously symbolic music video was followed up by several videos with little to no symbolic meaning, because they knew that's not exactly what people needed. Since then, they focused on the messages of unity and connection. They even threw in some heavy symbols in the Film Out music video, as a treat. But otherwise, we are in a strange time of BTS. One where they obviously have a plan to continue and potentially wrap up the Bangtan universe storyline, but where they're just not doing that. And that's cool. I'm certainly enjoying it. It feels organic and right, given the spirit of the times. But I don't think I will ever forget that moment back in February 2020 when I felt something on the horizon. Perhaps we were all connecting with the spirit of the depths. Thanks everyone for watching this video. I've always felt like this video has haunted me and I could never figure out why. So this is the best explanation that I can give for myself. And that's basically my warning, is that this is my interpretation and everyone's interpretations are valid, especially with how many symbols were used and especially with the lack of an actual storyline. Don't forget to like and subscribe and potentially share this with your friends who are also interested in BTS theories. And maybe consider buying me a coffee if you have a second in the links below.